Yes, I do. Good evening. Welcome to the 45th annual meeting of the South Brentwood Residents Association. I'm Elisa Morgenthaler, president of SBRA. We have a wonderful group of speakers and program for you tonight. First, we will receive a crime report from LAPD Senior Lead Officer Matt Kirk, followed by pre-recorded remarks from LA County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl. We will then hear from Kimberly Barnett from the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, who will report on the joint agency cleanup of the encampment on San Vicente and other homeless issues. We will then hear from U.S. Congressman Ted Lieu from Washington, D.C., and then followed by Dr. Stephen Braverman from the West LA VA. Next, we will hear from LA City Council member Mike Bonin, Brentwood Community Council member Doris Goldstein, who will report on the enhancement on San Vicente, followed by State Senator Ben Allen. The program will end at 8:30. Speakers will take some questions during the program, and then there will be a 30-minute question and answer period at 8:30. Before the program starts, we will hold the elections of our officers and directors for next year. The candidates were introduced to you in the video, which played at the start of the meeting. The following have been elected by our board of directors to be officers for next year. Elisa Morgenthaler, President. Elise Arbor, First Vice President. Lauren Cole, Second Vice President. Susan Hirsch, Vice President of Communications. Pamela Brown, Vice President of Community Safety. Adrian Bacci, Secretary. Melissa Spagnuolo, Treasurer. We have proposed a new slate of board members in addition to our officers. They are Len Blum, Toby Mauriciano, Armando Pendola. May I have a motion to approve the board of directors for next year? Gary, thank you very much. Can I have a second? Thanks, Pam. Now I'm going to ask the SBA board members to cast their vote for this motion by clicking on the ballot that will appear on your screen. Nathan, have we?
Sorry, I messed something up, but we have to redo it. I apologize.
Cast your vote again. I see the motion is carried. Thank you very much, and congratulations to our new board. In addition to our voting board, SBRA has advisory board members to assist with our activities. The advisory board for next year will be Gary Average, Bear Allen Blaine, Laurel Davidson, Judy Hewlett, Veronique Millen Trimble, Mark Sleeper, and Pam Taylor. Thank you in advance for the wonderful work you do for SBRA. If you are interested in joining the SBRA board, please fill out an application on our website, southbrentwood.org. And that application can be found on our membership page. We are actively recruiting additional board members at this time, and we would welcome your involvement. I would like to recognize Mary Wong and Pam Brown for the amazing job they did organizing this meeting. Lauren Cole was also invaluable in finalizing the many details that go into a complicated Zoom program like this. I would also like to give a shout out to Gary Average, Go Graphics, for the fantastic job he did with the banners, signs, and flyers. Thank you to all of you. SBRA represents over 18,000 people, including the homeowners in Brentwood, south of San Vicente, and the residents of all multifamily buildings anywhere in Brentwood. With this large voice, SBRA was busy accomplishing great things for our community last year. Some of SBRA's accomplishments and projects were listed in the video, and they are on our website. SBRA has board meetings the third Thursday of every month, and we encourage members to attend our meetings. The agendas and minutes for the meetings are posted on our website. If you would like to attend any of our board meetings, please send an email to info@southbrentwood.org, and we will send you the Zoom link or meeting site. SBRA asks for dues annually, and I would like to thank everyone who has paid their dues for 2021. Your dues allow SBRA to fund events like tonight. We would like to replenish the treasury so we can resume in-person events. So if you have not paid your dues, I encourage you to do so now. Dues are only $40 for individuals, and for seniors, they are $25. You pay your dues by going to the website, southbrentwood.org, clicking on the membership page or the membership tab in blue, which is on the right-hand side. As an incentive to pay your dues, the first 17 members who pay their dues online receive promotional gifts. The gifts included 2 10-class gift packs from Barry's Boot Camp, $10 gift cards from Vicente Foods, and $10 gift cards from Pop's Bagels. We still have 3 of these wonderful prizes left, so I encourage you to rush to pay your dues immediately. We will reach out to the winners of these prizes after the meeting. Finally, we'll be sending you a short survey about tonight's program and SBRA's activities. We ask that you take a minute to complete this survey. I will now turn the virtual podium over to Board Member Toby Mauriciano, who will introduce our speakers and moderate our program. Nathan, can you unmute Toby?
All right. I can unmute. Our first Zoom issue for the day, so everyone drink. Thank you, Lisa. It's my pleasure to introduce all of our wonderful speakers tonight. Every speaker deserves a round of applause, but you're all on mute. So if you could please clap your hands very close to your ears, it'll have a similar effect. And let's jump into it. Senior Lead Officer Matthew Kirk is our first guest. He has been with the LAPD for over 20 years and been Senior Lead in the Brentwood area for 5. His role is to monitor the crime trends for the Brentwood area and be the liaison between the LAPD and the community, working in partnership to reduce crime. He has a pre-recorded message and he's a little bit nervous about his first foray into on-camera work, but he will be here to answer your questions later on. So please email them to us at info@southbrentwood.org. Lauren Cole will be monitoring those over the course of the night. There will also be some slides for this presentation that will be shared in the chat for you to reference during his presentation. And without further ado, let's roll the video.
Good evening. I'm Senior Lead Officer Matthew Kirk. I'm the Senior Lead Officer for the Brentwood area. I'd just like to thank you guys for having me at the South Brentwood annual meeting. I'd first just like to start off with my contact information. You can reach my desk at 310-444-0744, or if you'd like to email me at 34713@lapd.online. If I'm off 2 to 3 days, as soon as I'm back in the office, if you don't get a response right away, I'm most likely on days off. If I'm on any extended days off, I will definitely leave you in the hands of another senior lead in the office and they'll handle my area until I get back, but I always will put that out in an email so you know beforehand. I'd like to start off with the crime stats for year to date compared to 2020. Basically, we're doing pretty well in robberies. We're down 20%, which is one crime. We have 4 robberies year to date now versus 5 last year. Our aggravated assaults are down 12.5%, which is one crime. We had 7 this current year versus 8 last year. So our total violent crime is down 7.7%. Our burglaries are also down 3.8%. We had 51 year to date currently and compared to 53 last year. So there's 2 crimes there. Our biggest increase was 36.8%. That was in grand theft auto. And the main concern about this is that a lot of these occurred when the keys were left inside the vehicle or the car was also left unlocked. So the biggest issue is even when you're parked in your driveway and it's well lit, these people come by, check door handles. If that door unlocks, if it's unlocked, they get in the car. If it's most cars now have a start stop button, they'll push that button. If the car starts, they take off in it. And also a problem in parking garages in apartment and condo complexes, the tandem parking. There was one occasion where they took both cars because the owners of the cars would leave the key for the other person so they could, back the car out and get their car out. So that's occurred on numerous occasions where they stole 2 cars because it was easier to leave the keys in the car than have the person go upstairs, get the roommate or their husband or wife to move the vehicle. So that is a major problem. So I think if keys are not left in the car and the vehicle is left locked, that's going to really curb the amount of stolen vehicles. In recent months, it's gone down, but it's still, I get reports every once in a while in the last month, and their cars are left with keys in the car. So that's a major issue that I'm hoping that I can get the word out. I try and put it out on my weekly reports to remind people not to do that, leave the keys in the vehicle and leave the cars unlocked. Our other increase was theft. We were up 9.3% in theft. Most of this theft has to do with mail and packages, usually in lobbies of the condo or apartment complexes. And a lot of those are clearly visible from the street. So I try and tell people, if you know your neighbors, that helps out a lot. If you know you're going to get a large package or any package at all, and you're not going to be home till later in the evening, or you're out of town, make sure you have a neighbor or somebody in that building that can pick up that package, because if they're left out, I've been to numerous buildings during the day and there's piles of packages. It looks like Christmas morning and there's packages everywhere. That's very tempting, specifically if those packages are left overnight. A lot of these crimes occur at 2, 3 in the morning, and on a lot of the video surveillance, you'll see these people, either they pry open the front lobby door, or somehow they are able to go in through the garage and come up into the lobby, and they do take any packages that are there, and then a lot of times they'll pry open or use a postal key to get into the mailboxes. So majority of these thefts are package and mail thefts. And a lot of people ask, how to report that. If they defeat a locking mechanism to get inside your building to steal the mail, then it becomes a burglary. If they're able to get into, say, an unlocked and walk right in, it's going to be a mail theft. You can report it to LAPD. If it's a burglary, you're going to have to call the non-emergency number, and a patrol vehicle is going to have to come out and take that report. If it's a package theft, where, say, it's an open lobby where it's open to the public, it's going to be a theft. If there's no video, it can be taken online. You can report certain crimes online. You could report theft, lost property, burglary from motor vehicle if there's no video, identity theft, non-hit and run traffic collisions, and annoying phone calls, texts, or emails, and vandalism can be done at lapdonline.org. There's a bar up there to make a file report online. It'll let you do that. You answer some questions, and if it doesn't allow you to make the report online, it will basically kind of boot you off the system, and it'll tell you to call your local station. And if you need to file a report and you can't do it online, you can call our front desk at 310-444-0701. And they're there from 7 in the morning to, I believe, 8 o'clock at night. If you do file something online at the time you didn't have video, and you make a report online and you do come across video, you can always let me know of your report number when you filed the report, whether it's online or if you did happen to do it over the phone, or come into the front desk. If at a later date you have video of that, please put the report number. You can email that to me, report number, and then if you have video, you could send me the video. I'll review it, and if it's something useful, I'll give that to detectives and add that to the report. So those are very important things, is reporting those crimes, because we plotted on maps. I've attached 2 maps that hopefully will be, edited into this video so you could see where the crimes occur. Majority of the crimes, like I said, are auto crimes and mail thefts, and those occur majority in condo and apartment complexes. The BFMVs, they like to get into those underground garages, because once they're in there from the street, they're non-detected from people driving by in cars and passing by. So to not leave the car unlocked and not leave valuables inside the vehicle. Those are the 2 major things on the burglary theft from motor vehicles. Is people they always say, well, it was only a gym bag, but from the outside, if they see a bag in there, they don't know if there's a purse in there, money in there, all kinds of stuff. If they see a big bag, the car's locked, it's in an area where they think they can make a little noise and not be detected, they'll smash the window, grab the bag, and at a later area, either outside the area, they'll check and see if there's anything good in it. But the major issue is not leaving anything visible in the car. If you have to leave something visible, place it in the trunk and out of sight. And even the chargers and expensive, the chargers where you just lay the iPhone on the charger, they might go after those if those are left in the car. So leave it completely clear in the car of no valuables visible. Same thing goes for the lobbies. Packages, try and have them picked up as soon as possible. If at all possible, if there's a way to have a lockable closet where the deliveries can be either placed in by the delivery Amazon people, locked in that closet so they're not visible in the lobby, or if the people can grab those before they sit in the lobby too long, and it makes it very attractive to the criminals to walk by and see a large quantity of Amazon boxes in the lobby. And with the holidays coming up, we usually have in West LA, we usually tend to have an increase in package thefts because of all the delivery for holiday gifts that are going to be delivered. So I urge everybody to try and, with your building, try and organize a way to have those packages either locked in a closet or have a neighbor bring them in, and it'll definitely decrease the chances of these people coming back to try and get more packages. If there's nothing visible, they move on to the next building. Same with the vehicles. But aside from that, I'm hoping that, finishing off 2021, our crimes continue to go down. I'd like to see a less grand theft auto, crimes occurring. It's trending in the last 2 months it's been trending down, but since the beginning of the year it's spiked up a little higher. So we're kind of fighting. We're ahead 7 crimes right now. So I'm hoping that we can trend downward in the latter part of 2021, and hopefully 2022 will start fresh and keep those crime numbers low. So if there's any questions, this is, at the end of this meeting, I'll be standing by to answer any questions, whether it's related to what I spoke about or if it's anything else that's a topic that would be good for the general discussion of the South Brentwood community. So thank you for having me, and look forward to a great 2020. And maybe next year this will be a live and in-person meeting. So thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Matthew Kirk. And he'll be on again later. Next up, we have a pre-recorded message from Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, who you probably know is finishing out her second term as LA County Supervisor for our area. You may not know she also served 14 years in the state legislature, was the first woman in California history to be named Speaker pro tempore of the Assembly, and the first openly gay or lesbian person to be elected to the California legislature. So without further ado, Sheila Kuehl.
Hi, I'm LA County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl. I'm very happy to be with you this evening and to share with you some of what makes me feel optimistic these days for Brentwood and for LA County. We're just emerging from the worst pandemic in 100 years. We lost far too many lives, and we're still losing lives. But things could have been much worse. Most Americans took the public health crisis seriously. We were able to develop a vaccine in record time. Millions of people lost their jobs, but now the economy is rebounding. Our kids are back in school, and an increasing number of them are able to get vaccinated. We are back to near normal, but not fully normal. As you probably know, during the pandemic, the Centers for Disease Control advised governments not to disturb homeless encampments so as not to spread the virus. And in LA County, we complied. Smart public health policy slowed some of our homeless rehousing efforts. Encampments all over the county grew in size and permanence, and over time, some of those encampments grew sufficiently disruptive that while bearing in mind CDC guidance, we took additional steps to rapidly rehouse people experiencing homelessness. Over a 5-week period during the summer, more than 200 people were moved into housing from the Venice Boardwalk. And we have begun to do the same thing at the much smaller encampment near the VA, known as Veterans Row. Look, I know many residents of Brentwood have expressed concern about this area, but we expect that by the end of October, we will have successfully moved all of the veterans currently living at Veterans Row into interim or permanent housing and remove the tents in which they're currently living. I know that living near encampments can be disturbing. There's one not very far from my house. And I very much appreciate your patience over the last 18 months as the county has balanced the need to protect public health with our desire to advance our homeless and housing efforts.
All right, that's Sheila Kuehl. And to speak more on that live, we have our first live speaker. And just a little heads up for the live segments. If you are a speaker and you can time yourself, that may help you know how much of your material you've gone through. We always have issues with someone like losing track of time. And when your time is up, I'll come on and just let you know. If you're on the audience, don't worry, they've done nothing wrong. It's just, how Zoom works is it can be hard to sometimes keep an eye on the clock. And without further ado, we're extremely proud to welcome this next speaker. She has been working on the ground in homelessness services and outreach for over a decade and is now Associate Director of the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. Please show your love for Kimberly Barnett.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. A little bit about myself. I'd like to start just a second to just share a little bit about myself. I started in homeless services actually as a volunteer at my church, serving our homeless neighbors for several years before I decided to shift my profession from being a paralegal into doing boots on the ground, what we call outreach. That was 15 years ago, 15 years after. As Toby said, I'm now an associate director at LASA for our access and engagement team. And I'm so glad to meet all of you and see all of you, because honestly, as a community member that started the work that I'm doing now as a community member, really worried and concerned about the folks experiencing homelessness in my community, I appreciate these types of groups that bring these things forward and seeing how we could collectively work together to end or possibly solve homelessness in our communities. Many times the folks that are in the community are either from the community or connected somehow to the community, like our homeless neighbors on what's called Veterans Row. Little bit of an update on that. We're making great progress with the support of our city partners and our partners with the Board of Supervisors, the VA, outreach workers from PATH and from Volunteers of America. We have created a kind of like a task force to aggressively and consistently work with doing everything we can to ensure that every veteran that is experiencing homelessness there is able to get placed and get continuum of care for the things that they need to do in order to obtain permanent housing, permanent and stable housing. Not just that, we're also working together to ensure that they're tapping in or able to access benefits that many sometimes are not connected to the benefits that they have as previous folks that have served in our military or who have disabilities and need to upgrade their status to get the appropriate pension and benefits that they deserve for serving our country. For the last, 4 or 5 months, we've been really working hard to create an environment where we have transparency with our partners that are serving the community, making sure that we're touching base. At this time, we're touching base in the morning and at the end of the day to get progress from every person who's out in the field to see, who's been able to be moved into what we call interim housing, which is it's kind of the in-between before, after being on the street, but before being into permanent housing, so that we can connect that person with their case manager, social worker, or anyone who's going to be serving them in their transition. we've made some great progress. We had at one point 50 to 60 of homeless neighbors experiencing homelessness on Veterans Row. I'm happy to report that as of this evening, I just got home. As of this evening, there was approximately under 20 people still there, with great partnerships with the VA and our partners, like I expressed earlier, that are serving the area. We were able to successfully put people into, actually some were able to go into permanent housing, which is really great news. They literally went from street to home within 30 days, which is a great, great success. And we have many of them also going into the program that's already in the VA campus. So we've been very successful with that. And I believe, just like Supervisor Kuehl said, that by the end of the month, which is tomorrow, hopefully by Monday, you should see a significance, if you haven't seen it tonight, a significant decrease in not just the visual homelessness, so the tents and things like that, but actual folks who have been connected successfully to services there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Is there anything real quick you wanted to add, or are you sticking around for the Q&A?
I want to stick around for the Q&A, but I think I have enough. I put my timer on. I think I may have some time to answer any questions if somebody has something directly they would like to ask me.
Okay, well, we're going to try to consolidate it later on, but thank you so much for your time. And we're going to keep things rolling on to, let's see, next up we have Ted Lieu. So Ted Lieu was first elected in 2014 to represent us in the U.S. House of Representatives. He currently serves on the House Judiciary Committee and House Foreign Affairs Committee and several others. He's a former active duty officer in the U.S. Air Force and currently serves as a colonel in the reserves stationed at LA Air Force Base. He's established himself as a leader on the environment, cybersecurity, civil liberties, and veterans, and been an outspoken proponent for tackling climate change and against discrimination. I could go on for a very long time, but without further ado, please welcome Ted Lieu.
Well, thank you to South Brentwood Residents Association for inviting me. I'll give you an update on veterans homelessness, and then I'll give you an update on what's happening in Washington, D.C. When I first became a member of Congress, one of the first bills I authored was the West Los Angeles Leasing Act of 2016. It set up a whole new master plan for the West Los Angeles VA, and at its full build out, it envisions about 1,200 to 1,600 units of permanent supportive housing for homeless veterans. It's taken some time to start getting these buildings up and running because of various environmental permits and funding issues and so on. However, one building has been completed and 3 others, buildings 205, 208, and 207, will be completed by fall and winter of next year. And in the meantime, working with our amazing local county and city and other partners, you may have seen the construction of the bridge home on the campus, which was made possible by county and local leadership, the creation of the CTRS program, which are the tents that you see at the West LA VA. We're also doing the introduction of tiny shelters at the West LA VA. 25 are scheduled to be delivered this weekend. You've seen the creation of safe parking on the campus. By the end of this year, you're going to see part of the original VA Welcome Center designated as shelter for homeless female veterans. And currently in the works, we're working on the creation of a mini welcome center just inside the Brentwood gate, which is going to be staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a couple of emergency beds and tents for late night veteran arrivals. And I know that Dr. Braverman will give you additional updates as well. If you look at what we're trying to do overall, working with the county, you've seen a reduction in the veterans on Veterans Row. I was very pleased I got another bill signed this year with the signature of President Biden. And what that did is it said that any lawsuits that the West LA VA wins, that funding will go directly right back to West LA VA to help veterans instead of going to the General Treasury. And also put in some changes to make the leasing easier to build these permanent supportive housing units. I was also pleased to welcome with the chair of the Veterans Committee, Mark Decano, earlier this month, the Secretary of the VA, Secretary McDonough. And when he was here, I told him the first priority is to make sure we work on veterans homelessness. He agreed. I'm very pleased that he then later announced that in fact is his first priority at the West LA VA, and he's working with the county. And the goal is to get everyone on Veterans Row into housing by November 1st. So you've seen a reduction. Hopefully we'll get there by November 1st. I know the folks are working very hard on doing just that. Now, you may also have seen what's happening in Washington, D.C. So earlier this year, we passed the American Rescue Plan. That was a transformative bill that became law that was designed to do four things. It was designed to get kids back into schools, people into jobs, cash into pockets, and shots into arms. And it's largely accomplished those goals. And so we now, since January 20th, have created approximately 5 million jobs. The unemployment rolls have declined. The stock market is up, and you're seeing the economy start to get going again. We also realize that we lost a lot of jobs during the pandemic, and that's why we're working now on two major bills, one on infrastructure for roads, bridges, and highways, as well as broadband everywhere, and a second bill called the Build Back Better Act that's going to provide universal preschool as well as an extension of their tax credit for families with children. It's going to have elder care provisions. It's going to have provisions to help people with childcare. It has a lot of family-focused provisions. And so we're trying to get both those bills across the finish line. So that's my update, and happy to answer any questions that any of you may have.
Sure. So I have collected some of the questions that were emailed to us at info@southbrentwood.org. You can still send them in. And I think the fairest way to do, a lot of people had questions on the same topics. So I'm going to ask the ones that sort of got the most attention first to answer, questions that the most people had. So one thing a lot of people asked about was this bill that's just been sort of revealed a little bit today. And we're wondering a few things about how it'll affect our community. So one is, are there going to be any investments in Brentwood in terms of, the LA Metro, the Purple Line's opening here, and plan to go over the Sepulveda Pass in the coming years? And also the SALT cap is something that we were emailed about, and just the strategy and how this has gone forward and has played out. And so if you could speak to that for a minute, that would be wonderful.
Sure. So I'll speak on the SALT cap first. I believe it should be completely repealed. When the Republicans passed that in the last administration, it had a disproportionate negative effect on certain states, including California, New York, and others. And that essentially raised taxes on middle-class families across the state of California, including in Brentwood. And so we'll work hard to try to get that repealed. Whether or not that makes it in a final bill, I don't know. The negotiations are still ongoing. It's one reason we, in fact, didn't take a vote today, because we're not quite at the finish line. We are close. And we passed essentially an extension till December 3rd of the Surface Transportation Act, which was expiring. So that gives us time to get this done. Hopefully we're going to get done well before December 3rd. But that's what we voted out today, was an extension of basically the deadline. So there's two bills. The SALT issue will, if it goes in, will be in the Build Back Better Act. Regarding transportation infrastructure, that's in the infrastructure bill. A lot of the way that the funding is designed is it's administered through grants. And so what would happen is you would say, here is a big pot of money for public transportation, and here is a big pot of money for highways, and here's a pot of money for roads and bridges and so on. And then local jurisdictions would then apply for projects to get funded. And so that's how it could help our area. And I think there's a very compelling case to get funding to alleviate the traffic on the 405. So that's basically how it works. And I don't want to get too confusing. Separate apart from that, as a member of Congress, I also get to do community investment projects. It's something that we recently brought back this term. And so I can also request specific pots of money to go to specific directed projects. Whether or not that happens also depends on negotiations with the Senate. So it's not clear if that would happen. But just to let you know, in my list of directed projects, alleviating traffic on 405 was definitely one of them.
Great. And I just want to remind people, I see some hands raised with the Zoom feature, but the way to ask questions is to send an email. We are actively monitoring the count to info@southbrentwood.org, just so we have them in one place. And, we're trying to keep on a tight schedule and stuff. So I know you wanted a question regarding renters, and we represent renters as well. We're very proud to do so. And the biggest issue for renters in Brentwood and statewide really is just our really chronic housing shortage. California is 49th in housing per capita. In West LA, we've been great about creating jobs, which has been awesome, but we haven't created anywhere near as many housing units. And that's created sprawl, and it's, jeopardized our climate goals as more and more traffic goes on that 405. And it's also tied to homelessness, of course, because, in city after city, we've seen, and studies have shown that once a certain amount of people a good portion of people are rent burdens, homelessness tends to spike. And Los Angeles ranks near the bottom on a lot of those metrics of overcrowding, of rent burden among tenants and stuff like that. So generally, this has been seen as a state and local issue, but now it's getting a little more attention at the federal level, since similar dynamics have played out state or nationwide and other hot metros. And so I was wondering, what do you see as the role of the federal government here? And what can we do to increase the housing supply in Los Angeles?
That's a great question. I absolutely believe we need more affordable housing. When I was in the California State Legislature, I was a big proponent of Proposition C that provided funding for affordable housing. At the federal government level, I've supported a number of different housing bills. The Build Back Better Act right now, as it's constituted, has about $150 billion for housing. And that would actually create more housing across America, including in California. So hopefully that stays in the Build Back Better Act. I think it will. And that over time could help some of the problems that we're seeing. But we absolutely do have to create more housing. It, as you noted, it leads to a lot of problems when we don't have enough housing.
And had a few more questions coming in. I want to make sure I get as many as possible. So a lot of people asking about the environment. You've been a leader there. What are we doing to sort of lead the world? I mean, as climate change is becoming more and more of an issue, we're seeing a lot more wildfires and everything like that at home. Knowing that our climate is also affected by countries around the world, China and India as well, how do we create a global movement and stick to our goals in terms of reducing carbon emissions?
So before I answer, let me just say my amazing staff, Janet and Nico are on this Zoom. And if you need any things resolved at federal agency, please let me know. If you need your passport renewed, if you're not getting your Social Security check, if something is wrong with the IRS regarding your taxes, please contact us and we will assist you. Regarding the environment, one of the reasons that many of us are fighting so hard for the Build Back Better Act is because it has a huge environmental amount of funding. So I support the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It just doesn't have very much environmental stuff in it. So that's why we're fighting for the Build Back Better Act, which has, as it's currently constituted, $555 billion worth of funding to help the environment. And that's a whole lot of money. And so that's why we're trying to get both through, because we're in a climate crisis and we're running out of time to solve this. So my goal is to make sure that the housing component stays in the Build Back Better Act, as well as the environmental part of the Build Back Better Act.
Awesome. One other question was, can you discuss the possibility that LA could lose a congressional seat due to the 2020 census? And do you think that census was accurate, or do you see any issues of that? And will it affect us in terms of resources that go to our community or in any other way that we might notice?
I have no reason to doubt the accuracy of the census. I just want you to know, in terms of expectations, it actually turned out better than we had feared. So the worst case scenario was that California would lose 2 congressional seats, that New York, for example, would lose 2 congressional seats, that Texas would gain 3 congressional seats, and so on. That actually didn't happen. So California lost 1 seat, New York lost 1 seat, Texas only gained 2. And some of the other states that were projected to get more, such as Arizona and Florida, did not get what they were projected to get. One reason is because we made a pretty big effort in California and spend a lot of resources to try to make every person get counted in California in terms of the census. I want to know that California didn't actually lose people. We actually gained people last 10 years. We just didn't gain people as quickly as, for example, a place like Texas. So we are going to lose one congressional seat. Right now, based on the draft visualization that their independent redistricting came out, it does appear that that one seat could come from the LA region. And if that draft map was put in without any changes, it will in fact come from the LA region. But it's just it's not even a draft map, it's actually a visualization, which is before a draft map. So it's still in its very early stages. So we'll see what happens, but that's where we are right now.
Great. And if you have time for one more, we have a question about whether there's a possibility of increasing Medicare coverage to 55 plus, and whether that could happen in this bill or in the future.
So I support providing hearing, eyesight, and dental coverage to Medicare. There are a couple U.S. senators that don't support that. Actually, I think there's one. I think Senator Manchin doesn't support it. And we don't have 52 Democratic senators in the U.S. Senate. We don't even have 51. We have exactly 50. And to pass a Build Back Better Act, we're going to need every single vote. As a result, every senator sort of can be president. And so right now you have a couple of senators that are basically saying they're objecting to various provisions. So currently there is no dental or eyesight expansion for Medicare. However, there is expansion for hearing for Medicare in the current version of the Build Back Better Act.
Cool. And I guess you're wrapping up your time, so I don't want to keep you longer than you can. But is there anything that you would like people to understand, any misconceptions that people have about Washington? We get a lot of questions about bipartisanship or how should it work, or, everyone's got an opinion. So I'm curious if there's any wisdom or insight that you'd like to impart to us on, things we might not know about and what goes on in Washington.
So we're very close to getting these two bills done. And it is, in reality, you're getting like 96, 97% support among both senators and members of Congress who happen to be Democrats. I think we're going to get the additional, 3% in a few weeks. And then we're going to have an ability, I think, to really transform our economy and to make the investments that we need for America to continue to grow and prosper in the 21st century. And I also want to note, talk a little bit, I'll end about COVID. So we know that vaccinations work. If you're not yet vaccinated, please talk to your doctor or read what the American Medical Association has said about vaccines. We're seeing case rates across the country start to drop. We're seeing hospitalizations start to drop. And next time that I see all of you, hopefully I'll be seeing all of you in person. So stay safe out there, and thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you very much. All right, Congressman Ted Lieu, everybody. Give him a round of applause visually. It's the best we can do, but we'll make it work. All right. And Congressman Lieu mentioned in his remarks that Dr. Braverman at the VA would also be speaking today, and he is up next. So he'll be continuing some of those, some of that topic. And he also has a long list of accolades that I could spend a long time reciting, but I will just note that he was appointed Medical Center Director in 2019. Prior to that, he spent 30 years in the Army Medical Corps. He's been Director, Commander, cool title, of Walter Reed Army Institute of Research and several other hospitals. He's worked with the Surgeon General, deployed to Iraq in 2008 and 2009, and has won numerous military awards, including the Distinguished Service Medal. Please welcome Dr. Stephen Braverman.
Okay, hi. Are you guys able to hear me now? All right, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the this group in SBRA. I note that I was originally invited to speak to you all at last year's meeting, which was canceled because of COVID. And that would have been before there was any discussion associated with the encampment over on San Vicente. And I'll also note that if you listen to Kim Barnett and Congressman Liu, they already gave half of my presentation. So I can just start taking questions now. Just kidding there a little bit. But what I do want to start off with is making sure that folks know that, you know, we are a healthcare system, and not everything we do is just about taking care of homeless, although that's a really important part of what we do. But I'll talk a little bit about COVID, and Congressman Liu mentioned vaccination. We have a high vaccination rate within our system to include our employees as well as our veteran population. And as a result of that, we've done very well through this last pandemic. We peaked at about 15 inpatients at one time at the very height of this last surge. And now for the last month or so, we've been in very low single-digit numbers of inpatients because of our vaccination rate. And as the Johnson & Johnson Janssen vaccine and also the Moderna vaccine received approval this last week by the CDC and the FDA, and Pfizer a few weeks before that, we're continuing to vaccinate our veterans and our staff with boosters as appropriate. And we're strongly recommending anybody who received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and is more than 2 months out, which is pretty much everybody there, come to us if you're a veteran and get a booster shot with Pfizer. We think that's the way to go. And Pfizer is the vaccine that we've primarily used since it came out for everybody back in December of 2020. So very important messaging there is vaccine is available for those who are recommended to get boosters. The Secretary visited with us a couple of weeks ago, as Congressman Liu mentioned, and had a very good visit toward the facility, toward the north part of our campus, where a lot of our supportive housing is being renovated for our homeless veterans, and also toward the area of San Vicente where the encampment is. And his position is that with almost 10% of veteran homelessness here in our area, that this is kind of ground zero on the effort to help our veterans get housing to the maximum extent possible and move towards ending veteran homelessness here in Los Angeles. And in fact, this will be an area of innovation for all of us as we continue to move forward with that. His goals, as he identified in a press conference last week, were to house all of the veterans on San Vicente by the end of this month, by November, and then by the end of the year, house an additional 500 veterans into permanent supportive housing or some other kind of continued housing that leads towards that permanent housing. And we're well on our way to do that. You heard some of the updates on the San Vicente encampment today. We anticipate that we'll have housing options solidified for every one of those veterans that are still on San Vicente encampment today. All but 5 have move-in dates planned before Monday, and the last 5 we continue to work with in conjunction with our community partners, LAZA, LASD, the VPAN network with the Department of Mental Health, Supervisor Kuehl's team, PATH, US Vets, Step Up on Second, AMVETS, and local advocates that have really made a difference for all of us as we've tried to work together to make a difference with these veterans. What I want to do real quickly is just talk about the things that are available on our campus and have been available all along with the campus. We have our community treatment and reintegration service, that's CTRS, initiative, which is the tenting area within the campus. We're the only VA in the country that does that. And we started doing that in April of 2020 in response to the pandemic. We're using the emergency authorizations that we have in order to fund that program. The passage of the West LA Campus Improvement Act had a special clause in it that allows us to use lease revenue and restitution funds in order to support emergency shelter. And the good thing about that is it's going to enable us to continue to fund that initiative even after the pandemic is over. We've had over 500 veterans that have gone through that low barrier to entry program and onto additional housing and getting their healthcare services. And it's made a great difference to a lot of folks. Many of our veterans in the San Vicente encampment were there in part because of the camaraderie, and the support that they had from folks and from each other. And one of the things that we're doing that also is new and hasn't been done before is to bring many of them onto the campus as a group in that CTRS area, on an area where we've already laid asphalt in order to stage tiny shelters. That's the next step in that CTRS initiative, and to put tiny shelters there, a little sturdier kind of shelter situation than the tents that are there now. And as those build up, we'll have 25 coming in tomorrow to take our total to 28. They'll be prioritized based on clinical need of the individuals that are engaged in all of our various programs. Congressman Liu mentioned the Abridge Home, which was a community, city, county dual effort to have transitional housing there. We have about 60 veterans there now, 47 in CTRS. We have New Directions, which is transitional housing, and then the enhanced use lease building for permanent supportive housing, which has 54 units now. Those are all full. And then another 179 coming on board here in the next year. So that's going to take us over 233 units that'll be available next year. So we're well on our way to finally getting over that bridge that kept us a little slower than we would have liked to move forward with renovations for the housing for our veterans. The VA has put up about $35 million last year in order to improve the utility infrastructure that will support the renovation on the north part of the campus. Looking at another expenditure this year in order to continue that so we can turn over those buildings to the developers and accelerate the process that we have to be able to renovate a lot of those houses. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the moderator. I will rejoin, I guess, about 7:55 or so for questions, if that's still the plan. Over.
Yeah, maybe a little bit earlier where we have politicians coming in hot. They're coming from other commitments, trying to double book themselves and everything. So we may be a little bit out of order. So just a heads up. And at 7, I would say maybe shoot for like 7:45 or something like that for Q&A. Right now, speaking of going a little bit out of order, Doris Goldstein, are you on the horn?
I am. There I am. I just unmuted myself. Sure, we can do this.
All right.
Okay.
Doris Goldstein is the chair of the Brentwood Community Council Transportation Committee. And now for something completely different. She will be talking about a wonderful opportunity to improve the walkability of the downtown San Vicente Business District. And a little bit about her. She moved here about 6 years ago. Before that, she lived in Jacksonville, Florida, and was one of the pioneering members of the team working on the development of Seaside, which is a new town in the Florida Panhandle that really demonstrated next generation land use principles for compact, walkable, mixed use communities, later known as new urbanism. It's kind of become pretty famous. And so she continues to consult on pedestrian friendly urban design all across the country. Very delicate have her as the chair of the Brentwood Community Council Transportation Committee. Please give a lot of love to Doris Goldstein.
Thanks, Toby. Nate, as he may not have the slides up yet because we're out of order. I have slides. There we go. Great. Okay, thank you. I moved to the San Vicente area for exactly the same reason that I bet a lot of you did too. It is a walkable neighborhood. It's known as that. It's got great restaurants and stores, and a lot of people are out on the street. But there are some ways in which our streetscape is not as pedestrian friendly as perhaps it could be. Next slide, please. So a lot of the problem is just the geometry of the street. It's a very wide street, and that's because we've got this beautiful median down the middle. There used to be a streetcar line going down the median, and that's why all the retail developed along the street. And now we have the beautiful coral trees there, but it does make it a very wide street to try to cross. And then when you have these diagonal intersections, it makes it even harder because it's a very long stretch of road. Next slide, please. So I started looking around and trying to think about what could be done to improve the situation here and make this a better place for pedestrians because there are so many of them on the street. And the first thing was the condition of the medians themselves. Here you've got a narrow little sidewalk, and this person had to walk across a very inhospitable stretch of gopher holes in order to be able to punch a button to be able to do the next stretch of the walk there. And that just is not a very inviting way. To me, it felt like kind of almost an insult to the pedestrian to have to go there. Next slide, please. This situation, there's no curb cuts on this median. This woman walked over to push the button, left her baby stroller over there on the sidewalk, and then she had to back the stroller off of the curb because there were no curb cuts on this median where she was waiting for the next turn of the light. Next slide, please. And then finally, the biggest issue is that the crosswalks don't go where people want to go. When people are trying, but this is particularly true in front of Whole Foods, where people want to get to the front door of the supermarket, but instead the crosswalk takes them to the far side of the parking lot. So it's very natural for people to leave the crosswalk or not even go on the crosswalk at all, to find another crossing place on San Vicente Boulevard in the middle of the street that will get them closer to the front door of Whole Foods. So next slide, please. I made a slideshow out of these and many other pictures, and I went to the Brentwood Community Council and others and tried to get in to see if people were interested in trying to make some improvements on the street. And Nancy Friedman was one of the first ones to get interested in this. And she told me it'll get done, but it'll take a long time and it's gonna be a lot longer than you think is possible. And she, in some ways she was right. But she probably should have added that it'll take a lot of other people along the way to help also. And I want to thank Lauren Cole at this point, because Lauren was also one of those who was involved very early on. And she organized some of these walking tours of our intersections, which brought together people from the neighborhood with city employees. And we were able to document some of the issues with the street and start thinking about ways that we could try to improve the situation. Next slide, please. So the first thing that happened, and this actually happened before the pandemic, was that the timing was adjusted on the crosswalks. And this made a tremendous difference without having to change a single thing on the road itself. Just giving pedestrians more time to cross just changed the way that they were able to navigate these intersections. It's particularly noticeable on San Vicente at Barrington. Previously, there really was not enough time, even though that was a relatively short intersection, to get all the way across. And now it's easy to do so. And the diagonal crosswalks or diagonal streets at Gorham and Montana are still a little bit tricky to navigate. If you're jogging, you can do it in one turn of the light, but it's still an improvement. So that's been a big deal. Next slide, please. Gophers, they're on their way out thanks to the Coral Tree Fund. They have relocated hundreds of gophers from the medians. The gophers are very damaging to the coral trees. They like the roots, they like to eat the roots, and the coral trees are fragile as it is, and the gophers were really severely damaging the remaining coral trees on the median. Next slide, please. And then finally, this is a big one. And for this, I have to thank Councilperson Mike Monin and his staff. They really went to bat for this and were able to obtain $2.5 million in Measure M funding, specifically for San Vicente walkability enhancements. This came through at the end of 2020. There's been a lot of work since then to get the money going in the right place. And it is specifically for the area between Bundy and Brigham for San Vicente, the Central Business District. This is separate from the first last mile improvements for the extension of the Purple Line that will be opening up at the VA hospital. And there will be a separate funding measure for that. We will be working to try to get to make sure that the new stop connects to the neighborhood as it should. Next slide, please. So this money is going primarily for the type of hardscape improvements that we need to make these crossings safer for pedestrians. And that's curb ramps, curb cuts for the medians. That baby in the stroller is probably in kindergarten now, but we're getting those curb cuts. Curb extensions and upgraded crosswalks and signals. So next slide, please. If I can talk just for a little bit about curb extensions, because I think that these are going to figure in pretty prominently in the rethinking of San Vicente Boulevard. They're sometimes called bump outs, sidewalk bump outs. And what it does is instead of stretching the crosswalk to meet the sidewalk, it stretches the sidewalk to meet the crosswalk. And it gives the pedestrians additional safe area in which they can wait for the light to change, to give them time, to allow them to enter the crosswalk. It means that they're out in traffic for a shorter amount of time, and it's just much safer. This was done at Montana and the farmers market recently, and you can see that this area was created with the use of bollards and paint, and that's a typical way that these curb extensions are tried out. It's done first with bollards and paint, and then in some cases, if they're successful, they will be created as actual sidewalk extensions. But just adding the bollards and paint gives us a chance to try that out and see how it works. We're very careful. This is not a road diet. We're not talking about removing lanes of traffic or interfering with the bike lanes in any way. But this, if they're designed properly, this really can be a huge improvement for pedestrians and shortens the length of the roadway for them as they cross the street. Next slide, please. The design process is already starting. Streets LA has been in the middle of scoping the work and such. And when they get into the design phase, they will be doing that with a lot of public input. The list of projects, the types of projects may expand as we get into this. And there's a possibility that there might be additional funding down the road. Next slide, please.
I'm just going to bump into us.
Yeah.
We are running low on time.
Okay.
Would it be possible to cover the rest if in the Q&A section?
I am almost at the end. I
Okay.
swear. Okay. I'm
All right.
there. So a minute. Okay.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So we've been talking about safety, and safety is critically important, of course. But this is also a chance to think about the beauty and pleasure of being part of a walkable community. I think this particular corner is especially beautiful and a great place to gather with friends. Next slide. And COVID, if anything, has made us even appreciate even more our outdoor gathering spaces. Next. The curb extensions are an opportunity as we expand our sidewalks that these might become small plazas and additional gathering spaces. Next slide. And it's also an opportunity to rethink our medians and beautify them as well. So that's the end of my presentation. Next slide. And we are going to be going into public input in the middle of 2022. And I look forward to hearing a lot of opinions. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Doris.
Doris.
That's terrific.
Thank you. And thank you, Suzette, as well. Awesome. I'm excited to never have to sprint across one of those intersections again.
Great. Thank you.
All right. So coming up next, we actually have a drop-in. We weren't sure if he'd be able to make it, but we're lucky to have him from the LA Sheriff's Department. Everyone welcome Lieutenant Diedrich. Is Lieutenant Diedrich there? Hello? Checking. All right. Is Mike Bonin on? Doris, I'm so sorry I rushed you. There was no reason to.
Okay, I was at the end.
All right.
I'm sorry. I think I think that I thought we had.
Toby, he's talking. He just
He's
needed.
muted. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Let's, Nathan, can we spotlight Lieutenant Dietrich so we can hear him?
I'm looking for him. Maybe he's. Do you see where he is logged in under?
Yeah.
Apologies for the Zoom bugs. I hope we can all appreciate how much more challenging it is on Zoom.
Yeah, we've never lost someone walking to the stage before.
He said he was in, so we just have to figure out what happened to him.
Talking, so I'm asking, we will find out what his name is, his display name is.
He's deep undercover.
We were in a meeting earlier, and I believe he appeared as iPhone. So if you see somebody as iPhone, that could.
iPhone, okay.
Sorry, just
Get him to start over.
I see a bunch of phone numbers. 323-219.
Probably shouldn't give his whole number up, maybe.
Sorry.
Right, he has been
I have a
invited
common
to
user.
unmute.
That phone is in the list. Do you see it?
It just told me I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we apologize. Can you start over? We didn't hear anything.
Oh, it sounded good the first time. Well, first of all, thank you. I'm Lieutenant Jeff Diedrich, and I oversee the Sheriff's Department's Homeless Outreach Services team. And I was asked to come tonight to provide some information and clarity about the current county operation going on at the San Vicente encampment. So to begin, it's important to note that the host team is a specialized, first of its kind in LA County, Homeless Outreach Co-Response Collaborative Team, which means it was deputy sheriffs and is deputy sheriffs, along with homeless outreach providers from the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority that work as one team. It's not like we call for help or we plan to meet. We are one team and we deploy together. It was the first of its kind in LA County. It was also the first of its kind to receive and then deploy special crisis intervention training, which was basically a state-of-the-art curriculum developed by the psychologists within the LA County Sheriff's Department, utilizing state-of-the-art techniques for not only crisis intervention, but crisis stabilization, de-escalation, and simply just providing a roadmap to recognize windows of opportunity to employ the guardian effect of law enforcement, which quite often isn't talked about. So it's a specialized team, and this team has been in existence since 2017. We're a member of the E6 County Collaborative Team, and one of our requirements and obligations is that we are part of the LA County Homeless Encampment Resolution Protocol. That protocol has been in place since 2012, and it was a collaboration between the CEO's office, the Sheriff's Department, and the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority to address homeless encampments with compassion, dignity, and also ensuring that constitutional rights were respected, and just bringing civility and accountability along with compassion to increase public safety and public health while addressing increasing homeless encampments. So here, while the team is deployed at the San Vicente encampment, it's a collaboration between the Sheriff's Department, the Sheriff's Department's host team, Supervisor Sheila Kuehl's office, the LA County Chief Executive Office, Homeless Initiative Office, our partners at the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, the Department of Mental Health, PATH, St. Joseph's, Step Up on Second, the Department of Public Works, and the VA, the Veterans Administration. The encampment protocol process has been ongoing. There was a momentary stall in the beginning due to personnel. We're back up to speed, and we've been that way for the last month. And there is a resolution date of November 1st. During the outreach and assessment process, it's been a tremendous collaboration with the VA and with our outreach providers who have connected with every veteran on the sidewalk and have connected them with placements. I'm not sure, I wasn't able to hear earlier what information you were given, but there's been numerous placements. There's also our VA partners, as most people know. The Secretary of the VA did a declaration a few weeks ago, but each person has been assigned a placement, and we see that the resolution protocol will conclude on November 1st. And so in a nutshell, that's what the current county operation looks like. It's been a tremendous collaboration. We treasure those collaborations, and we work with these agencies throughout the county on many different projects. But the host team is the lead for the Sheriff's Department on this protocol operation.
Great. Are you wrapped up?
Make it concise, sir.
All right,
Toby,
awesome.
I'm getting a bunch of questions about that. I think, or can I ask the lieutenant? Just the questions.
Sure.
Okay, just
Sure.
quickly, Lieutenant, I'm monitoring the questions that are coming in. There's a lot of questions about, we're hearing a lot about how the vets are all getting housed. So the one set of questions, what's happening with the people who aren't veterans that are on that stretch? And then secondly, what happens after you do the cleanup if people start coming back? What's the enforcement?
Well, I can tell you, I've been out there 16 times, I believe, in the last 30 days. There was only one non-veteran there who is no longer there. So everybody, and I was there as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. Everybody that was on the sidewalk were veterans. There was a few guests, I'll give you, but the people who were in the encampment were all veterans. So those people obviously have their placements. And so as of right now, there is no one that is a non-veteran that we have a concern. But if that does rise up, our outreach providers have the capability to assess and then place those people also, but we don't see that right now. They are all veterans. As for the maintenance effort, at the conclusion of the resolution protocol, the Department of Public Works is going to assess the sidewalk, provide some sanitation, just general cleaning, see if there's any kind of construction issues that need to be addressed. And then after that, there's going to be a county collaborative process to just provide maintenance there at the site and working with the VA to ensure that anyone that does come back can then be quickly outreach to and then placed within either the VA if it's appropriate or elsewhere. But there will be a significant county maintenance effort at that location.
Great. And I believe we have Mike Bonin on the line. So I'm going to swing it over to him. I know he has a tight schedule. So I think he probably needs no introduction, but he is represented West Side Neighborhood Councils on the city council since 2013 and has been at the forefront of taking on some of LA's toughest challenges with regard to homelessness, affordable housing, and so on. Without further ado, please welcome Mike Bonin.
Apologies, Toby. He was on the call and then his Wi-Fi just dropped, so he's trying to log back in right now from his phone.
Of course, Zoom. It's always something new every corner. Real quick, I'll introduce. This is actually Noah Fleischman. And Noah Fleischman is well, you can introduce yourself, I guess, but you're like an assistant who has been very helpful in handling some matters in Brentwood, some graffiti cleanup and things like that. And he'll also be, although Mike can't stick around for the later Q&A, he's going to be here for the whole time, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So
I'm the council member's deputy for Brentwood.
Okay. So if you have further questions and requests and things like that, you can let let Noah know.
Yeah, there's a question that just came in, which I think Noah can answer while we're waiting for Mike Bonin, if we didn't just lose Noah. And that's somebody how do people get a hold of your office and people in your office right now is a question that came in. What constituents said they've been having trouble getting responses. So what's the best way for people here? How should they do outreach?
If people would like to get in contact with our office about an issue related to Brentwood, they should feel free to contact me directly. And I'll give you my email address right now. It's also on our website. It's noah.fleischman@lacity.org. So it's my first name, NOAH.FLEISHMAN@lacity.org.
While we're waiting for, I'll just double check. Do we still have Dr. Braverman on? I think we had a few questions come in that he might be able to answer.
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, one question came in. I guess there was a comment that veterans who live on campus aren't allowed to drink or do drugs. I don't know if that came up during this, but they want to know why, if those are not illegal. What's the policy of people living on campus in the VA and whether they're allowed to do those things?
Sure. So for those who are in our programs, there's not a sobriety requirement, but there is legal requirements that it's not permissible to drink alcohol on federal property. It's not permissible to do drugs on federal property. It's not permissible to act violently on federal property. If somebody partakes in vices off the property and then comes back, then there's nothing that's going to prevent continuation in any programs. But if somebody is breaking the law because those are illegal on federal property, then that's a challenge for us.
I'm just looking to see, is Matthew Kirk on? Because I can see a question that came up that would go to him. I don't know if he was logging back in later.
Can you hear me?
Right. Yes, terrific. Just while we're waiting for Councilman
Sure.
Bonin, there's been a bunch of chatter and some emails today that apparently Ralph's at Wilshire and Bundy was doing tree trimming for the last several days at 5:30 in the morning. And what can be done about that and what kind of enforcement?
I just got the email this afternoon. I tried to reach out. Somebody gave me an actual picture of the truck with the license number or the business license and the phone number. I tried this afternoon about 4 times. Nobody answers and their voicemail is full. But basically for that, they can work from 7 in the morning. The construction hours, that falls within the construction hours. They could work Monday through Friday, 7 in the morning until technically 9 o'clock at night, which nobody does. They usually try and start earlier and get done earlier. The only time they could deviate from that is, say, a tree's down blocking the road. It's usually going to be city people that are going to be doing emergency stuff, but any kind of emergency, say a ruptured, I don't know, some kind of ruptured line on a property that needs to be fixed, you'll know when it's an emergency. Tree trimming like that is not an emergency. If they start before 7 o'clock, call the non-emergency number. I know people say it takes forever to get through, but wait to get through. Even if you call at 6:30, they're out there trimming the trees. Make sure you still have the officers show up and try and meet with them if possible, whether it's at the site where they're tree trimming, or you could have them meet them at a different site. But let them make contact with the guys, because you observe them doing the tree trimming prior to the 7 o'clock in the morning. You could still have the officers ask them to go and speak with those guys and say, listen, if you guys start prior to this again and we catch you before the 7 o'clock start time or without the parameters the city has set forth, they could be cited for it. And I could tell you, once they get cited for something like that, the company that's going to end up paying it, they will stop the tree trimming. So that's, and I know a lot of times people call the 1877 Ask LAPD, that's the non-emergency number, and it takes forever because obviously for non-emergency stuff, but make sure even if say it's 8:30 and the patrol car, they'll call you back and say, do you still want police to respond? Make sure if you're available, say, yes, can you please have them respond? And at least meet with them and say, can you go over there and tell them they start at 6:30. They can't issue the citation on observations of a citizen. They have to actually observe it being done at the time. But at least going over there and kind of letting them know, listen, you can't do this, because if the police never show up and maybe a citizen says, hey, you're starting before the time you're allotted to start, they kind of blow it off. But if the officers go out and speak with them, usually that most of the time is enough. At least when I've had construction sites that started earlier, when I go out and tell them, listen, if I get complaints about this, I'm going to park my car out front of here at 6:30 in the morning. And if you guys start, I will cite you for it. And usually that fixes it. I don't know if this tree trimming is like a 5-day project or whatever, but if tomorrow morning they're out there at 5:30, anybody that lives in that area, please call the non-emergency number. And if at all possible, wait for the officers to show up. And if they call you and say, do you want to meet with the officers or do you still need them out there? Say, yes, I do. Because they can easily go over and talk to those guys trimming the trees. And if they speak Spanish, we can get a Spanish speaker out there to talk to them and let them know that they can be cited for it. And I know if they're the owners of the company, they're not going to want the ticket. And if they aren't and they're workers, the owner's not going to want the ticket. So that's the best way. But it's the follow-up. And even if it's after the time frame, the officers can still go out there and speak with them.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I see
You're welcome.
Fernando Morales from, I believe from Sheila Kuehl's office has his hand up. Fernando, did you have something? Let me, before you say it, if anybody has questions, just to remind everyone, you can email it to info@southbrentwood.org. And now I will turn it over to Fernando Morales, if hopefully we didn't lose him there.
Hi, everybody. Fernando Morales, I'm Supervisor Kuehl's District Director. Sorry if you hear any noises. There's a pretty lively community event happening at the band shell, so my apologies for that. I just wanted to introduce myself. Zachary Geidsick is the field deputy for the West Side, and I know many of you know him, but just wanted to make sure to say hi and say that I'm happy to take on any county-related questions as well that come up.
I've had a few come in, so thank you. I believe these are county, well, you can tell me if they're county or city. A lot of questions about building affordable housing more quickly. Prop HHH and Prop M were approved by the voters, but why is it taking so long to build housing? And can we do more things like tiny shelters or temporary housing to accelerate building more housing?
On the city, within the city of LA, I would actually defer to the council member's office just because planning and land use runs within the city. But I do know that this is something that both the city and county have looked at, and including, in conversations with the VA as well. Tiny homes, potentially kind of pallet shelters, which is actually the name of a specific product, not a type of unit. But I don't want to step on any toes, so I'll defer to Noah or to the council member if they would like to speak a little bit more about HHH and building.
Is Noah, is Mike on yet, or has he been able to rejoin?
Apologies, but we're still having a little bit of technical difficulty. I'm a far cry from the speaking abilities of the council member, but I'm happy to try and answer what I can from what Fernando said. In terms of areas around Brentwood, yes, we're working with our office. The mayor's office is working with the VA right now to have a tiny home on the inside there that would replace their CTRS tents there, in a similar partnership to what the city, county, and VA did for the Bridge Home facility. Obviously, the council member has been one of the largest outspoken proponents of shared housing, which is another transitional form of housing that can quickly be created, as well as the bridge homes that I've mentioned earlier. And obviously, voted for and supports Prop HHH, which is a city proposition. For folks that want to grill Fernando, there's also Prop H, which is a county proposition. But Prop HHH was a city proposition to build permanent supportive affordable housing.
Excellent.
And we actually have on the line, I see Senator Ben Allen has raised his hand. And so
yeah, I was just saying if it would be helpful for me to go now, since you're waiting for Mike, we could do it that way, because I got done with what I was doing earlier. So if that's of interest to you, because I know I'm on the agenda.
I think that would be terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, go for it. This next guy, you've already heard him speaking. He's great at raising his hand. He's always on time or earlier. And he represents the West Side, Hollywood, and South Bay communities of Los Angeles County. Chairs the Senate Environmental Quality Committee and the Committee on the Arts, the Jewish Caucus, co-chair of the Environmental Caucus. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Ben Allen.
All right. I just figured it would be best for time management. I've got a little 3-year-old son, and we've been putting him to bed, but it looks like he's getting to sleep, which is really great. Anyway, it's great seeing everybody at the annual meeting. Obviously, I remember these meetings when we could actually meet at the church, and that was always really nice to see everyone in person. But I'm sure pretty soon we'll all be doing this again together in person. But this gives us a way to log in from the comfort of our own homes. I just want to give a little bit of insight into the state's response to building back from the pandemic and how it impacts our community. First of all, I just want to say, just like the other members' offices who've been represented, we've got a really active team here in the district that have literally handled thousands of requests from constituents. Our office was flooded with calls and emails asking for help with unemployment challenges, small business support, residential and commercial rental issues, inquiries about state government, and so much more. My small team, I think we were trying to figure this out. We resolved literally over 3,000 individuals and business owners cases in our district. We're actively assisting an additional 600 more. So please, if there's anything that we can do to be helpful to you when it comes to anything involving the state government, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office, and our doors are wide open for you to assist our constituents. We wrapped up our legislative business in Sacramento this year, addressed, really with a focus on addressing the immediate needs due to the pandemic, while also keeping an eye on recovery and building back for our future. We were able to put in quite a bit of money for grants and tax cuts for small businesses. There was a program to allow companies to deduct up to $150,000 in expenses covered by the Federal Paycheck Protection Plan. And then we approved AB 80, which gives the small businesses that were hit hardest by the pandemic a $6.2 billion tax cut over the next 6 years. And there's more help coming. My colleagues and I approved the fiscal year 2021-22 budget, which will provide Californians with billions more in pandemic-related relief for individuals and families and support for small businesses and nonprofit organizations. We set aside $25 billion for a rainy day fund, which is super important. I'm a former school board member, as many of you know, in Santa Monica, Malibu. And of course, remember the last recession and how difficult that was for us. And so having a strong rainy day fund at the state is going to be really important in trying to smooth out longer term financial liabilities that really do impact local governments and school districts and all the rest. We made substantial investments in education, health, social services, and infrastructure. I mean, part of this, of course, part of how we were able to spend so much more money, and I'll tell you a little bit more, is that the market was so strong. I mean, how crazy, in our country that we shut down the economy and the market hits, record highs. But it basically is suggestive of some crazy disparities in very different sectors. So we've been able to, well, take advantage of the success and the wealth generated in our community and in our state by some of the companies that did incredibly well during the pandemic, so as to help prop up some of those businesses and certainly individuals, people who are down on their luck, to get them moving through the pandemic, to keep them on their feet, so that we can emerge stronger. Obviously, in the area of education, we worked really closely with schools, including Nick Melvoin and the folks from LAUSD, to provide support for remote and in-person instruction. We secured record amounts of funding and per pupil spending for public education. We created a first in the nation free lunch program for public school students, expanded broadband access for students. We're also able to help renters and mom and pop landlords, homeowners, avoid eviction and foreclosure. There was stimulus relief for individuals and families that were feeling the severe impacts of COVID-19. Invested a $12 billion record in addressing homelessness. We're going to spend about $12 billion over the next 3 or so years. And that will really help out some of the efforts that I heard you discussing earlier, Project Home Key, Project Room Key, supporting our partners at the local level in Mike Bonin's office and at the county to ensure that they've got the resources they need to address the homelessness crisis on our streets. And as I say, we were able to do all of this while strengthening our state's reserves. On the landlord and renter issue, I should just mention that there still is money available, quite a bit of money. It come through the federal government. So if you are a landlord who has a tenant who is not able to pay full rent because of the pandemic, because of economic impact associated with the pandemic, or if you're a tenant, a renter who has been impacted by the pandemic and that's impacting your ability to pay your rent, you should also reach out. You can reach out to us, and I mean, all the other government offices are helping with this ERAP funding. It's ERAP, the rental assistance program, and that money is available to help keep people in their homes. It's money that will both make the landlords whole and also keep you in your homes. There's some paperwork you have to fill out, but it's well worth doing if it's true that your ability to pay rent was impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. At the local level, we were able to do all sorts of cool things through this new budget. We got money for the Museum of Tolerance and the LA Museum of the Holocaust. We got money for Topanga State Park and Will Rogers State Park for deferred maintenance projects, $2 million to them. We were able to build a pedestrian bridge over the Pacific Coast Highway that's going to connect the end of the bike path with the Potrero Canyon Park that's now being developed. It's going to be a really special place for people to visit. Funding for the Santa Monica Mountains. And then lots of social service programs in and around our area on the west side. I spent a lot of time working on a lot of different kinds of bills. I'm an environmental guy. I chaired the Environmental Quality Committee. Also very anxious to try to speed up the transportation. We had SB 54 that we did that is going to expedite our transportation projects. We're hoping to get that purple line out to our neighborhood before ahead of the 2028 Olympics, which is going to be huge. But there's also lots of other projects that are in the works. The build out right now, the transit build out in Los Angeles is the largest in the nation by far. And I think we're going to see our city transform in ways that will be really exciting. I mean, I go to other places, New York, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and I'm always so kind of depressed by how lame our public transportation network is, and to see the progress we're making so far and that we're going to continue to make with all this new support, I think is really exciting. Certainly, I think about it every time I get into the car at rush hour and just sit there in traffic for hours and hours, as we all have experienced. I also chair the Joint Committee on the Arts, been very involved with the TV and film tax credit extension, and we're hoping for it to be expanded in the not too distant future. I authored a bill that was inspired by the New Deal era Works Progress Administration to establish the Creative Workforce Development Act of 2021. It will provide employment and job training for artists and creative sector workers through public programs. I also did a bill that kind of builds on the work that the LA Times did when they found this really extraordinary cottage industry of illegal practices in the hospice sector. And we did a bill and called for the state auditor to look into the hospice care industry. It turns out that while the vast majority of players in this space are doing great work, and it's a really important service that they provide to people who are typically at the end of their lives, there were a lot of, unfortunately, some really bad players that were bilking both the taxpayer and also families. Anyway, our audit request was unanimously approved. The bill signed into law by the governor this month. It's my hope that our work will fix the problems highlighted by the Times expose. Anyway, worked on conservatorship issues. On the environmental front, we got our SB 433 through, which now finally give the Coastal Commission. They have, in the past, they had the right to go after folks who were violating the Coastal Act in questions relating to public access. And our bill now gives them clear authority to issue administrative penalties for unpermitted damage to wetlands and natural habitats or coastal waters, violations of the Coastal Act in those areas. And of course, it means that this will be the most, for the first time, the state will have this kind of penalty power to go after the bad actors like the folks who caused the oil spill off the coast just a couple of weeks ago. One of the things that's been so frustrating with that whole debacle is that there's so little power we have because that oil extraction was taking place in federal waters. And so I was actually, just went down to Laguna Beach. I was part of a group of legislators that were calling for a phase out of offshore oil drilling of all forms. It's going to be a complicated process, but from my perspective, it's incredibly dangerous. It's inherently risky. And it turns out that the amount of oil we get is just a minuscule fraction of the total oil we get, even here in the state of California, let alone in the rest of the country. And it just is not a risk that I'm interested in seeing us continue to take. Tackling so obviously, talking about oil. I mean, we're all very concerned about climate change. We're going into the COP conference. The governor's going to be there, a group of legislators. Just last night, I was at an event at the home of the British consul, who of course is taking a leadership role in this locally because UK is hosting the conference in Glasgow. But this is really a top priority for our state, doing what we can to continue to lead the way in reducing our carbon emissions and doing our part in fighting the climate crisis. Now, we also know, unfortunately, that climate change is a reality, whether we like it or not. And one of the many things we're trying to do right now is try to get some money for mitigation, both additional funding to increase fire prevention in the state, focusing on forest management projects and vegetation thinning that will also set aside money for low-income residents to fireproof their homes. But looking for more environmentally friendly ways of addressing the drought and wildfires, also in water projects as well. I had originally proposed a bond measure that would deal with a lot of these climate risks. And of course, because the budget was so strong, we were able to get many of the priorities that we were going to try to put into a bond funded directly through the budget, which in the end of the day is a better thing because it eliminates the need for a ballot measure, and it also doesn't require us to do more bonding and more borrowing for these upfront costs. Another environmental issue I continue to be really passionate about. Some of you guys know I've been working a lot in the area of plastics and plastic pollution, trying to reduce our plastic pollution. We're still working on our bigger play, SB 54, that's still in the works, but we were able to get a package of bills through, including my SB 343, which basically is a truth in environmental advertising law. The idea is that if an item is not truly recyclable, you shouldn't be able to put the recycling symbol on your item. All it is doing is confusing people and making it harder for the recycling system to work. I used to dutifully put every item that had a recycling symbol into the recycling bin. And then I found out that I actually was making the system worse by gumming up the machines. There's so many of recycling. Basically, as a rule of thumb, if you look at the bottom of a plastic bottle, if it's got a 1 or a 2 inside that chasing arrow symbol, the recycling symbol, it's highly recyclable. But if it doesn't, the chances are it's not getting recycled. It's going straight to the land. Well, it's first going to the recycling center. It's having to get sorted, which increases the cost of the recycling process, and then it's being sent to the landfill. So we're now going to impose a certain amount of truth in advertising. Anyway, that's just a couple of the things I've been working on. As I say, our office doors have been wide open. Please reach out to us if there's anything we can do to be helpful. I'm happy to take some questions, but it's continues to be a real honor to serve the South Brentwood community in the California State Senate.
Well, thank you, Mr. Allen. Really appreciate it. And Mike Bonin is trying to join. Is he back on yet? If not, we'll go to Q&A and we'll cut to him when he is able to get through. Bueller, Noah?
No, apologies. Still trying to get him on.
And,
okay.
and just to remind
this is why we
everybody-
need broadband investment, right?
Exactly. No, I think it's fine. I actually had questions for you, Senator Allen, but I think you covered them all because I was going to ask about that offshore drilling, and you covered that one. And one question, and the transportation. Is there any? I know other years there was interest in extending the Purple Line past the VA to Bundy and to Santa Monica. Is that happening? Dead? Any interest or?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I mean, and we'll talk to Mike about it. When I first got in the legislature, I was very interested in trying to get it extended to Bundy. That was something I was pushing for, because from my perspective, Bundy and Wilshire is such an obvious place. I mean, it's high density. There's a lot of housing there. There's a lot of jobs there too, right? And part of what we're trying to do is get people to, to get to and from their work centers and their homes using public transportation instead of in the car. I brought it up, I talked to Mike about it. He can talk about it when he jumps on, and Sheila as well. Unfortunately, I think by the time I got elected and was talking about this, I think it was basically the idea of opening it up for an additional station. I think just was just too complicated. It put additional burden on the process, and they basically said to me, like, look, we just got to get this thing to the VA, and then we can talk further about extensions later. I will say that it's unlikely that it will get extended, beyond at least in the form of a subway in the near or middle future. That being said, there is a very interesting project proposal that's out there right now. Folks may know that they're looking to build a gondola, like a rapid gondola, to connect Union Station and Dodger Stadium, so that during Dodger games, for example, we'll all be able to ride the Expo line or the subway to Union Station, and then you can hop on the train on this gondola that will run every minute or something. And they're actually pretty big. I mean, they can fit about 25 people apparently, and they work successfully in other parts of the country, in Portland, but also in Latin America and Europe. And anyway, the same group is that is in process. We're certainly hoping that will be fully operational by the Olympics, hopefully beforehand. But the same group is actually really interested in at least fulfilling part of the promise of the subway to the sea that you just alluded to. And if anyone ever watches the movie Her, you remember he actually gets out of the subway and walks right out to the beach at one point. And that was the vision that, Villaraigosa and others sold us on. And I think got people like me very excited. I would live along the route. But basically the idea is to have a gondola that would connect from the VA station and go right down to the sea, and it would be overhead. It would stop at Bundy, and then maybe 26th and maybe 14th, and then downtown Santa Monica. And it's fast and it's efficient, and there's actually quite a bit of interest in Santa Monica. It might be a faster, quicker way of getting a really substantive transportation infrastructure built along Wilshire. I know that the idea is going before the Metro CEO shortly, and we're just really hopeful that she'll view it favorably, and that process might also start getting into the works. I think it'd be a real positive for our area.
Can I just mention again, because I see a hand up and that person might have missed that. If you have questions, send them to info@southbrentwood.org. We apologize, just with Zoom, it's very hard to have people jump in and out. So we're trying to do it by email. So definitely, again, it's info@southbrentwood.org. Sorry, apologies.
Yeah, it's okay. I actually had a question for Senator Allen that ties into a lot of things you're talking about. So recently there was a Nobel Prize winner actually at UC Berkeley, who was an environmental scientist who was on the international panel for climate conservation or whatever it is at the UN. And he said that the number one thing that cities, and in particular California, could do to lower our emissions was to create more housing near jobs and near transit. And that ties in with a lot of other things we're talking about, where renters are getting squeezed. We have housing shortages and homelessness. So what are you doing at a state level to help increase the production of housing?
Yeah, I mean, there's funding. The Pro Tem, for whom this is a major priority, Pro Tem Atkins, did a big housing bond. I'm doing a bill on. I did a bill actually on tax increment financing that would give an additional tool to cities, kind of a financing tool for housing construction. Obviously, there's been a number of housing bills, controversial housing bills that have been making their way through the legislature that have really pushed the cities on their RENA numbers, on the way that they calculate their FARs, lot splits, allowing cities to upzone with a little bit more ease than they were able to before. So those are some things that are in the mix. There's also Sydney Comloggers bill, which is creating like a housing trust fund that's making its way through. If you've been following the LA Times editorial page, they've editorialized in favor of it pretty considerably. I've also got a bill, SB 261, that's trying to give some more teeth to basically the sustainable communities program that you were kind of alluding to. And it's all about transit-oriented housing, like really trying to build in vehicle miles traveled into the planning process. So I think part of my problem with some of the housing bills that they're like one size fits all, and they just sort of treat every lot the same, regardless of where they are, regardless of whether in the very high fire zone, regardless of how if they're really proximate to transit or not. I mean, I agree with your basic premise, which is that what we really ought to be doing is building, not building as much way out in the boondocks, right? Deeper and deeper into fire zones, for example, which just encourages sprawl. But it's good to build in places like downtown LA, where there's already a really strong transit infrastructure and a much higher appetite for density. I think there's a lot of that kind of construction that can happen. So. That's I think, I mean, of course, in the end of the day, it's the cost of, if the state were to take on the broader responsibility of housing everybody, the cost would be astronomical for the state. But I think the idea is if you create an atmosphere that allows for more, that incentivizes certain kinds of responsible housing construction, that could be a happy medium that could help us get out of our housing affordability challenges. Now, that being said, the other thing is we obviously, I'm very supportive of affordable housing. I think there's a lot of adaptive reuse opportunities that we could be taking advantage of. There's some folks downtown. We've been learning about how they've been rehabbing a whole slew of old hotels on the east side of downtown. And because it's a more blighted area, they've been able to kind of get them rehab pretty cost effectively, and they're now renting them out to people. So there's a lot of that infrastructure that already exists that we could be doing a better job of taking advantage of. And I think we should also be incentivizing that type of activity too.
All right. So is Bonin here? Last call. I don't know. What's the situation?
Very sorry, Toby. He's getting into his car right now to try and call in.
Poor Mike.
I'm getting lots of just because I told people to email in a lot of, can't he call in with his cell phone? So I pass along got some unhappy people. And Senator Allen, you got a comment. Thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing on the environment. So that's another email that came in.
Thank you. No, it's an area of real passion for me. I got to tell you, like, there are a lot of interest in Sacramento. Like, there's just not enough advocacy for the environmental protection in Sacramento. I got to tell you, we got to get more powerful and organized. There's a very strong Democratic majorities of both houses, and I've been really dispirited by how hard it's been to get even what I consider to be low-hanging fruit bills through the legislature. So, join environmental organizations, Sierra Club and CLCV and NRDC, all these great groups, Surfrider, Heal the Bay, and there's some great groups that need more support and strength.
One question came in, this might have been for Mike Bonin, but because you're here, any incentives? People are having trouble getting electric vehicle chargers into buildings, into condos and things. Is that a state issue or is that local?
Well, it is. I've actually done a couple bills on this topic, and I'm looking to do more. So I am really anxious to ensure, for us to meet our climate goals, we have to build out our electric charging infrastructure. And so if there are condos or HOAs or others that are standing in the way and making it hard for people who want to put charging infrastructure, within reason, I'm very interested in hearing those stories, because we've already done a couple bills, but we want to do more to make it so that folks who want to charge their cars at home are able to, and that people aren't putting up unnecessary barriers. I know we just signed a letter, to pushing for all new multifamily parking spots to have EV charging infrastructure. But please, if you're having trouble, contact us. I'd love to hear your stories, and I'd love to make sure that whatever we do next will incorporate your challenge and get your challenge solved.
Here's a question that came in. This is probably really Ted Lieu, but since you're here, I'll ask. Is there anything you can comment on with the post office and improving, or especially our local mail delivery, or is that really for the congressman's office?
Yeah, that's definitely for the congressman. But look, I'd love to hear the question. I mean, I'm pretty close to Ruth Yanata Galway, who was a postal commissioner. She was former mayor of Santa Monica, and she actually designed she came up with the concept of the forever stamp, which is such a good idea, right? I mean, we were always having to buy a couple extra cents just to be able to mail something. So I'm happy to pass on concerns, but I know that's something Ted cares a lot about, because I've heard him talk about it in the past. I think, Ted would tell you if he was on the call that he was pretty appalled by this I guess DeJoy, I think was the guy's name, who this Trump appointee, who has just been really awful for the Postal Service. And I know that they're really working to try to get him out, get new folks in, and get them the supports they need to be more effective.
Excellent.
We have a few questions that I could kind of pitch to either Senator Allen or any of the other representatives that are on the line. I mean, I think,
I apologize.
one of the things is,
what's
that?
I apologize to interrupt, Toby, but the
Noah
council
Zee.
member is on now.
Okay.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you, Senator Allen.
All right. All right. Without further ado, let's get him in while we have him. Please welcome Mike Bonham.
Hey, everybody. Good evening. And if I'm interrupting Ben, sorry, Ben. Apologies for both scheduling and a whole plethora of technical difficulties tonight. Joining you from my car, I am driving, which is why the video is not on. I'll just talk real brief, and then happy to take any questions about whatever you want. Big topic on everybody's minds is homelessness. I know you've heard tonight from other people engaged in that. I just wanted to mention very briefly the program that we have pioneered in our district that people are now beginning to look at as the model of how to house people quickly, cost effectively, and permanently. The model we used at Venice Beach had much in common with other city efforts, but much which distinguished it, which is netting different results. We got 213 people who moved indoors over a month-long period. All of them have been matched with a permanent housing resource while they stay in interim housing like hotels. 49 of them are already in permanent housing. That is a big and huge, different and fast result that the city hasn't seen. The difference between our program and ones being used in other parts of the city and the county is that most programs say, okay, let's move everybody into a hotel and then hope and pray that we find permanent housing. With our program and the model we're using, thanks to the state government, thank you, Ben, and Governor Newsom, and thanks to the federal government, thank you, President Biden, we have, for the time being, permanent housing resources, vouchers, a whole bunch of different kinds for different types of uses. So we started with the permanent housing. We were able to approach people and say, we have long-term housing for you. This isn't some ruse where you're going to get brought indoors for a week and then get thrown back outdoors. People jumped at the chance to participate in it. And what we did on the city end is we paid for the short-term housing, the hotels and the motels while people get moved indoors. It's a successful effort that some of my colleagues are now trying to emulate. It was done with the work of St. Joseph Center and LASA. They led it. And we are now bringing it to Westchester Park in the southern part of my district, where there are several dozen people living, where PATH, People Assisting the Homeless, will be the lead agency. And if the city and the county approve a partnership that me and a couple of my colleagues have proposed called Housing Now, which master leases apartment units for people to move into quickly, we can take this and we can do it in other parts of the city. And that's what we're looking to do. So we can do this in Mar Vista, so we can do this in Pacific Palisades, West LA, other parts of Venice, and of course, Brentwood. Happy to do any questions.
Great. I'll go through. We have a bunch that were emailed in advance. So I'll go some of those, and then I'll throw it over to Lauren for ones that have come in during the meeting if I haven't covered them. The big one we get is, measure HHH. Like LA, we voted to put a bunch of money. We wanted to house everybody. And then somehow, like a few years later, it's like we've got 5,000 new housing units for 66,000 homeless people, and they're costing $1 million each. Why don't we have these tiny homes that are cheaper? Why don't we have some sort of cheaper, faster solution? Why is our city just incapable of addressing this with the speed and scale that everyone wants?
Well, that has been my frustration for years. And back even in 2015, I was proposing quick, fast, far less expensive ways of getting people housed. The tools we are using right now in Venice and Westchester, motel conversions, master leasing, shared housing, those are the things I proposed in 2015. And people just didn't listen because they were sort of addicted to the idea of permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing, which Triple H funds, is a tool you do need in the toolbox. It ain't the only tool. It's how you help people who are chronically homeless, who have disabilities and need wraparound services. That is only 20% of the unhoused population. We can do much more quickly and much less expensively for the other 80%. And that's what we've been doing with the programs I've proposed. I would say, though, that our area of town is actually seeing a bunch of Triple H projects come online. You heard from someone from the VA a bit earlier, I believe. A lot of the stuff happening at the VA, they're allowing us to do, but the city is actually paying for it. Triple H, the city's Triple H dollars are actually is helping to pay for the rehab of 3 buildings for veterans there, just as the city and the county paid for the bridge housing there and is going to help pay for the tiny homes there. But we are also seeing Triple H funded projects in Venice and West LA, in other parts of the West Side as well. The one thing I would say about tiny homes work, but they only work if they are a step in the process of getting people into long-term housing. And I'm a little worried about the city's use of them because the units only cost like $7,000 or something. But the city, for whatever reason, we haven't done them in my part of town yet, it's costing the city like $110,000 each because of the infrastructure costs, the electricity, the plumbing. It costs less to put somebody in a converted motel room. It costs less to put somebody in a rental unit that we can pay for. That's significantly cheaper. You don't get a ribbon cutting, you don't get a photo op, but it gets people housed and it gets people off the street. So more quickly and less expensively. So that's the way to go.
Cool. Somewhat related, similar topic. So New York City has similar levels of homelessness to Los Angeles, but it also has a right to shelter law. And 95% of people experiencing homelessness there are sheltered year round, regardless of weather. In LA, we have something like 25% of people experiencing homelessness are sheltered. Beds only exist for a fraction of the people experiencing homelessness. And there's even been some reports of certain ones are violent or they have rodent infestations and stuff like that. So should we have a shelter law, and what do we need to do to fix our shelter system?
So a couple of different things on that. You're right. LA does not have a right to shelter. New York does. It's a mixed bag in New York. People are not living in encampments in most of New York, but the shelter system they have is incredibly expensive And it is a warehousing model. People don't get out of shelter. They just spend years and years in shelter, and it doesn't end homelessness. I was talking to a senior homelessness official from the outgoing mayor's administration there, and they talked about how much of a disaster, while it sounded good, the right to shelter has been. The way to go, really, is a right to housing, right? Shelter costs more. Most shelter costs more than a rental apartment does in many parts of Los Angeles. The rental is the solution, and it's cheaper. So skip the shelter step when you can, and you can in many cases, particularly people newly homeless, and just get them into the housing. The thing that we have done differently about shelter here in Los Angeles while it has existed is we started doing this a few years ago. I early on said, it's stupid and ridiculous to let people live and die on our streets while they wait for permanent supportive housing. Need faster methods. Couldn't get people bought into master leasing. So I said, let's do shelters differently. People didn't like our failed shelter system because it felt like a prison barracks. A lot of folks didn't feel safe in it. And you would be asked to leave your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend, leave your pet, leave all your belongings on the street, and get thrown out again in the morning. So we moved to this bridge system, which is 24/7. You can be with your family members. You can have some privacy. You can bring your pet. You can bring your belongings. That's a much smarter model. But with COVID, we're moving away from the congregate settings where people are in more of a shared space and trying to move towards more individual, whether it's motels or apartments or tiny homes, so that there's not the risk of infection because we may be living with COVID for a long time.
Okay, cool. Dovetailing off of that topic and housing, we had someone who wrote in who was interested to know how the RHNA process will affect the West Side. Given that we're talking about this housing shortage, legally obligated to add over 400,000 units to help alleviate the crisis, what are the panelists' recommendations? Or I guess, well, this is directed at you, but other people can feel free to chime in, for how community members can support the process, promote equity, and respect the city's obligations.
Good question. RHNA, for those who aren't familiar, is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. The state mandates that every area doesn't actually mandate you build, but it mandates that you plan for a certain number of units. And while LA City has done more than a lot of other places, we still got a long way to go to deal with a crushing affordable housing crisis. So there will be more housing coming to Los Angeles, and there will be more housing coming to what they call opportunity-rich areas where there's lots of jobs and amenities like the West Side. It's our job, yours and mine, through the community plan update process. Community plans in the southern part of my district are going on now, coming to Westchester and Playa del Rey in the next year or two, to plan where that should be. So we're actually coming forward and saying, here's where additional housing should be, and here's where it should not be. Rather than fighting over each proposal, define where things should go. And that's what the RHNA process will be like. In our housing element, which we're updating now, we are trying to build in equity, and meaning that areas that haven't done their share need to do their share. And one of the things that is very important in that is making sure that if we're dealing with an affordable housing crisis, that the housing we build is affordable and not just more luxury housing that displaces longtime renters, like many folks in the SBRA area, and provides new affordable housing, but also does not displace longtime renters who've already been there. And there's a number of different strategies I'm pursuing and some of my colleagues are pursuing to try to do that. And happy to talk about that at length sometime.
Well, one thing I want to maybe follow up on is, I'm a longtime renter, and so I didn't realize at first the difference between affordable housing and just inexpensive housing. Turns out these are very different things, where affordable housing is subsidized housing at specific low income levels, And, it generally, when nonprofits build it, it costs like $1 million a unit, 500,000 in some cases, so it's very expensive. And when you think of housing, that's not what you're thinking of. 96% of housing is just regular old plain unsubsidized housing. So one of the issues I think we have in Brentwood is we've had a lot of families who've had to leave, like across the state. We've had schools that are struggling to fill their enrollments. We had a similar one in Brentwood, although it has other issues too. And so, it's frustrating because it's like, we're Brentwood, like all of our housing is luxury housing, but yet it keeps increasing every year because of an overall supply shortage. So what do we need to do to like get to the scale of the actual amount of housing we need instead of just, subsidized programs that end up sort of being a trickle in a very empty pot?
Well, it's a combination of tools, right? I mean, you need more inventory, but you need to make sure that the market is regulated in such a way that it isn't unbridled and that it provides for affordable housing. And by affordable housing, that's a broad term that means a number of things, right? That means low-income housing for sure, but it also means moderate or workforce housing. That means housing that a teacher can afford or the receptionist at your dentist's office can afford. If you're like me and you have a young kid, none of their teachers can afford to live on the west side. They're all commuting an hour each way. We got to make sure we have housing for people who take care of our kids and provide medical services, and they're just sort of the backbone of society for our essential workers. And that can be done through inclusionary zoning. That can be done through some subsidized projects. Another way we can get more of existing housing on the market for cheaper is there's a lot of foreign, some of it's foreign, most of it's foreign investment, and hedge funds, venture capital that have bought up a lot of residential units and are leaving them vacant. It's an investment property. It's something that people invest in and don't necessarily have people living in. And we've been looking for a number of years, and I hope it'll be on the ballot next November, to do what Calgary has done and do what Vancouver has done and to do what Oakland has done, which is to put a fee or a tax on vacant units that are vacant for a long time, to push them back onto the rental market. And it's one of dozens of tools we need to use. There ain't no silver bullet. It's a bunch of different things. Some is more inventory, some is different programs, some is trying to regulate the market.
All right. I think we have one or two more questions that I wanted to sort of push out to the broader group. If you guys are still around, we'd love to have you chime in. So one of the ones that pertains to, in terms of homelessness, people are often say, well, we offer them services and they didn't want them. So what can we do? But it's very vague what services mean, because, we know that we don't have enough shelter beds, and it's not always clear, like, what exactly is being offered to people who are trying to get out of homelessness. Is it a hotel room? Is it a congregate shelter? Is it, what is it? And what are the common reasons that people don't take it? And can they be compelled to?
That's a fascinating question. And you're asking the question in a slightly different way than most elected officials do. Most elected officials in Los Angeles have historically said, we're offering people something, they're saying no, what's wrong with them? Let's force them to take it. I approach it somewhat different. I think it's incumbent upon us in the homeless services sector to say, what's wrong with what we're offering that someone might not take? When you're offering people in the middle of a pandemic a congregate shelter, it's not unreasonable or illogical for them to decline it. If you are taking someone who is a survivor of domestic violence and you're asking them to go into a mixed gender shelter setting, it's not unreasonable for them to say no. We need to be asking we need to meet people where they are and figure out what they really need. And when we did the Venice program, we learned that the line about people being service resistant was really overblown and was in many ways a myth. There was perhaps no population in LA, certainly on the west side, where people were deemed service resistant more strongly and indelibly than Venice. And when we offered long-term housing with services, people jumped at it. There were very few people who declined. It showed that there's a way to get people off the street, way to get people to say, yes, just got to offer the right thing.
I wanted to chime in that that's been our experience on the county end as well, and I've heard so as well from the supervisor. You know, in addition, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about some other services. Obviously, there's ongoing building of relationship as well. That's a prime component of what outreach does. And many of the outreach providers, specifically the outreach provider that is a lead for that specific area in the county, we break down the county into service planning areas, and that's how we kind of consolidate resources and know who is the lead and how it's all broken down. For example, St. Joseph Center, a member of a particular multidisciplinary team is able to kind of address or have mental health conversations, potentially make referrals to SUD services, substance use disorder services. But again, I did want to emphasize the fact of what Councilmember Bonin said. That is what we're hearing time and time again. I know that Kim's had an exhausting day and 18 months for that and many more. So I know she's not able to be here, but I'm happy to follow up with her too. And if there are any questions that I can maybe submit in a written response way, feel free to reach out to me or to Zach when he returns at the supervisor's office as well.
Okay. Lauren, did you have any other questions that came in? Do you wanted to throw out?
Yeah, there's just one topic, and I apologize to everybody. We were going to officially end the meeting at 8:30, but keep going with questions from anybody up till 9. So we will end the meeting at 9. I think most of
You are allowed to leave.
Yeah, one of the questions, I think everything's already been covered except for one, and this would be for Mike Bonin. There are questions about what's going on now with funding the police or defunding the police, and that one came into you. So I will let you address what your position is and what's going on.
Sure. The police have not been defunded. I know there's been a lot of talk about that. The police department, actually, its budget grew from last year to this year. Even with the reduction that the council made at one point to reappropriate some funds last year, the department actually didn't suffer a net loss year to year. So the department's budget has continued to grow. And the department's budget is 50% of the city's discretionary money, of the money that isn't earmarked by the feds for something we get. The money that we can say how to spend, 50% of it goes to LAPD. And what we are trying to do is find ways to increase patrol deployment without increasing the size of the department. Over the past 5 or 6 years, first with Chief Beck and then with Chief Moore, we were able, by hiring more civilians, to get the equivalent of 500 new officers out on the street by moving able-bodied officers off desk duty. That's the kind of strategy we're looking to do. I am, particularly as part of reimagining public safety in Los Angeles, trying to find ways to get police to be able to focus more on neighborhood patrols, crime prevention, and crime response by moving armed enforcement out of certain areas. We're piloting a 24/7 mental health team on the west side that'll be based in the fire station in West LA. And that will relieve some pressure on LAPD and free them up for other calls. We are looking to try to find ways to get armed law enforcement officers out of a lot of traffic enforcement. Chief Moore has already stopped sending patrol cars to a lot of minor collisions. We can get a lot of patrol deployment back by using either technology or civilian employees to do a lot of traffic enforcement. We're also trying to move LAPD out of homeless enforcement, lead with services, lead with housing, and then you have police officers who have more time to do the kind of 911 calls or proactive neighborhood patrols you want. I would say there was criticism last year when the city, at the beginning of the budget year, after approving the budget, reallocated money from LAPD to disadvantaged communities that have suffered from historic disinvestment. Those have gone to communities that have suffered, and a portion of that went to a program that it's launching tomorrow. The largest pilot program for universal basic income or guaranteed basic income in the country. There are 3,200 people 3,200 families that will be part of this pilot, where they will get $1,000 a month, no strings attached. Lower income areas will get more of it. Our area being relatively wealthy, there'll be 73 families. They'll be drawn by lot. And a program like this was done in Stockton, California. It reduced crime. It improved public health. People who got the subsidies wound up being employed at higher levels. It's something that's been talked about for a long time at the national level, and it's one of the things that we're trying to do here, led by Mayor Garcetti and a couple of my colleagues.
All right, well, we have one more question, and I think it's obligatory to ask at any LA community meeting, which is traffic. What are y'all going to do about traffic? I think that's literally like the question was like, what are you guys going to do about traffic? So I'll throw it out to the floor. You got any ideas? I know Ben Allen was talking about transit, stuff like that, but anything you want to brainstorm, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I've continued to be a big supporter of public transit. I actually was one of a small group of legislators that made sure that a big chunk of the money, well, a significant portion of the money in the gas tax is actually going to public transit construction and development and build out. I know we keep hearing some ideas about like congestion pricing, which seems to have been a project that worked well in Europe and elsewhere, and initially unpopular, but then very popular after people saw what a difference it made. I mean, I'd love to throw it over you to Mike. I mean, that's been discussed for some time. Is that going to have any traction, or is that still in the works for the neighborhood?
Not for this part of town, but potentially for LAX. But before I get too deep into that, let me just thank Ben for his incredible advocacy and leadership in Sacramento for the West Side and for public transit. The only way we are going to be able to get out of gridlock is to have a choice to use something other than the single passenger automobile. You can still use it, but we want to be able to provide people an alternative way to get around. So we will be launching Metro Micro, a neighborhood shuttle service for the Brentwood UCLA area. Sometime in the next few months. We're having trouble hiring bus operators. We have a neighborhood shuttle that is relaunching in Venice and Mar Vista and Palms and Playa del Rey and Delray. We have Metro Micro that we're providing in Westchester. We have to make it easier to walk. And we're working with SBRA and other groups to make San Vicente a more walkable and safe environment. We need multiple methods of getting around, multimodal strategies, so that you have various choices. Congestion pricing is essentially charging people to be in a certain area at peak hours. A few years ago, SCAG proposed that for the West Side. Many problems with that. Congestion pricing only works when you have the alternative transportation for people to choose. And that system ain't built out yet. We've got Expo, and hopefully we'll have Sepulveda, but that's not enough of a system to be an alternative to congestion pricing. Also, some social justice concerns. People said, well, people who live there shouldn't have to pay the fine, pay the fee. So then we've got a situation where a tech executive doesn't pay the price, but the person driving in from another part of town who makes minimum wage to mow their lawn or take care of the kids has to pay. And so there's lots of equity issues there. The place, I think, two places in LA make sense. Downtown LA, which has genuine transit options. And once we're done with the rail to LAX and the other improvements that we're doing now, it would make sense to do it at LAX because we will have provided the alternative, and it's not something that would hit people every day of their life. It would give people a taste of what congestion pricing is like and maybe open the avenues for other places.
Great. Alyssa, you want to close us out? I think we're at the witching hour. You're muted. You're muted. I apologize.
Thank you all for participating in this year's meeting and making it a great success, and for all your questions. And Lauren, can you make your announcement, because I do not have the
Yes. There's for anybody who wants to learn more about what's going on with the cleanup on San Vicente, or at least how it went, on November 3rd at 6 p.m. at Paul Revere in the auditorium, there'll be somebody from the sheriff's office. I believe it might be the sheriff, Villanueva, talking about it. It's going to be socially distanced. There's no pre-registration and there's no Wi-Fi in the building, so it won't be on Zoom. But wanted to make sure that anybody who wants to hear more about that topic knows about the meeting. Thank you, Elisa. Back to you.
Thank you for coming. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you for joining. And thank you to all of the elected officials who turned up. Thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.